Okay, got quite a few to get through because, I didn't have many for ages, and then all of a sudden, brain went into overdrive, kicked into overdrive, didn't it? Came up with a load of wacky ideas, really wacky, crazy ideas. So I haven't been on tyrosine for quite a while now. I don't even know how long, more than a week. And yeah, I'm feeling fine, so it definitely was just a placebo. Come on, guys, we all knew it. But that's what was needed, so... or maybe now I'm alright without it because of... I don't know, because I obviously stopped doing it after reading Lost Connections, because I really like that book. Liked it, but then obviously didn't like it because it was what I wanted to write. And it seemed strange to me that it would, be able to have that effect on me, because it didn't really say anything that I hadn't come to the conclusion myself. Maybe I just needed to hear it from someone else has realised. I needed to know that someone else had realised it. Anyway, I don't know. And obviously it seemed a bit petty for me to go, it didn't say anything that I didn't know. But I think the evidence is there. Connection to other people. I've been talking about how we're social creatures, and so you have to do that, cater to that. Intrinsic values, talked about that all the time. My memory was that I didn't think I have any, and I'm still not sure I do. Not sure I do know what mine are anyway, and all the other stuff. Right, let's just get through these because there are quite a few now. Team sports are highly useful for learning how to form the good tribal, i.e. strong, meaningful relationships in communities and whatnot, which prepare you for working as part of a team in adult life, but also satisfy these tribal needs directly. Working towards a common goal, leadership, cooperation, accommodation of others' strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, that's what sports are good for there. That's what makes them positive sum. Lost Connections is everything I wanted Derren Brown's Happy to be. And that's not Darren's fault, obviously. I think Lost Connections might be one of the best antidepressants on the market. That's funny because he says we need to broaden our idea of antidepressants, and I'm then including his book in that. My favourite line in Curb. Actually, there's another line which I've forgotten now anyway. One of my favourite lines in Curb was when he was playing bingo and the woman... He suspected the woman who'd been cheating, and I think they did anyway. And he says to the doctor at one point, he says, I can't even get it right. I'm a good bingo player. I think the way he delivered that line, and the line is very good. So that was my favourite. I like the kind of ones that probably get ignored quite a bit, but that one I really liked. Reading this strange adult children's book, The Little Prince, at one point the question is asked, why do sunflowers have thorns? The answer given was that there was no reason, and I wondered if I could come up with one. Obviously there is a reason, and never mind. Now, the immediately obvious option is things will just stay away from them so they don't get hurt. But, and really I could just look this up, I think that probably is the right one anyway. I wondered whether having thorns could cause larger mammals to get cut by them and then bleed and or get infected and die, and provide a massive boost of nutrients to the soil. Of course the animals would probably take a while to die, so it would seem odd how this could have been selected for genetically. Maybe if they got permanently caught on the thorns, let's be honest, it's just a deterrence mechanism. So yeah, it's just a deterrent mechanism. Okay, good. Oh, another idea for Sherlock I had for this. It's not really an idea. Never mind. Something I always hated when I was quote-unquote depressed was, yes, the inability to envision any sort of future that didn't seem intolerably devoid of any sensation, but more so the inability to complete, or rather answer, that thought experiment where you ask yourself, if you had more money than you could ever need, and money was no limit to your life, what would you do with your time? And having had a universal basic income reinvigorated in my mind by Lost Connections, I think it lends itself to a much more useful framing of the same question. If you had enough to live on without having to work for it, and there was nothing you could do, aside perhaps from heinous crimes, to lose your right to that money, what would you do with your time? I think, at least now, I can provide at least a vague answer to this. I'm not sure. Yeah, anyway. I think I'd spend time with friends who presumably would be less consumed by work also. Because at the moment it's quite hard to, obviously being someone who's not working right now, it's not fair for me to, anyway. But we're limited by how much time we can spend with people because of the amount of time we're working at different places. I would read, perhaps write. I would write a comedy series or a movie or a short, or perhaps collaborate with friends on a similar venture. Yeah, like a nice big summer holiday. But school summer holiday when, you're all close. I was thinking about the... Okay, so in that Monk debate with Jordan Peterson and Stephen Fry, at one point Stephen uses the word kike and talks about, because he was Jewish, he kind of is Jewish. It's not really. It depends whether you think Jewish as a Judaism can be conferred to someone as a race or a religion. But anyway, I was thinking about this as a result of Stephen Fry saying it during his debate about political correctness, which was a disaster. And frankly, it was only a really debate between him and, at some point, the lady. Well, actually, no, not really, because she was pretty... I didn't really like Jordan Peterson. I think he kind of got... It was annoying that he got ruined by he was right to get annoyed by it, because it was a stupid thing to say. I'll talk about this later anyway, but the mean white man comment, which obviously everyone has jumped on. I don't think it was that big a deal, but anyway. Anyway, when he said kike, he didn't say it in any particularly unique way. He said it as he might say any other word. No hushes, no sino or pseudonyms, and the room didn't turn silent as he said it either. The only other time I've heard it said is by H3H3, and again, there wasn't too much of a reaction to it, and so I have an extremely different emotional and physiological response to the word than I do to the N-word. In fact, I don't even know what it means, other than that it's derogatory in some way towards Jewish people. It literally means nothing to me when I hear it. I've never heard it used for any effect by anyone, for any real effect, and I think this is actually fundamental to determining the way we react to certain words, and this is pretty obvious when you consider how we learn language. When we hear someone say the N-word, the actual N-word, not the censored phrase, there is a group reaction of silence and derision. The emotion of the room is altered, and so there is a stigma that grows with each repetition of the word. The reason we feel bad is if we say the word in full, or even think about saying it. Not that I ever do. I really have no need for such a word, and don't think anyone ever should, other than to discuss it as a word. Or maybe for a joke, for which the joke obviously isn't about a person's race, but about the very idea of racism, or something. Anyway, when we say the word, we feel a certain way. You feel a little ill, in a sense that what you've done is wrong. Even if you experiment in private to test my hypothesis, you should still get the same sensation. Unless you haven't grown up knowing, unless you've never heard it being said in a social context or seen it on a film or something like that and seen how people will react to it. And this is almost certainly a result of our evolutionary tendency to pick up on social signals and behave in ways that are not adverse to the social norms. But if I were to invent a word and say that it was greatly offensive to blonde people, or better yet blonde people with blue eyes called Ollie Quint, and let's say this word is flimmel, it wouldn't mean anything to anyone without the social stigma being realised, unless when the word was said, everyone reacted in a way that made it obvious that the word has very powerful social consequences for the spouser of such a word. Nobody would care if it was said, and by whom. And this is how I feel about kike, and how we should feel about the N-word. See how I'm saying kike, but not the N-word in full. Now, obviously, the N-word and kike, and the K-word, are not perfect parallels, and I would never use the word kike in any way other than what I am now, simply because knowing that it is offensive is enough, because you can predict the social implications. Because if I'm being told that it's akin to the N-word and similar, then I know that the social connotation would be the same. But if you did like a social experiment where you took a group of people and they witnessed that some actors did this thing where one person shouted something at another person, like the word flimmel, and then that person got really offended, and everyone in the room, so you have got a room full of actors and then one person that you're experimenting on, or a few people you're experimenting on, and they all react really vehemently, then I think people would start to treat that word. I think you could convince those people that the word is similar gumption to the N-word. Anyway, I've obviously stopped tyrosine, but I've started taking omega-3s again, because I was thinking, one of the TEDx thing talks, which I don't generally like, because some of them are absolute bullshit. There's no real verification method, it seems. Anyway, I didn't realise, when I was taking omega-3s a long time ago, I wasn't actually taking omega-3, I was taking omega-3, 6 and 9. And 6 and 9, or maybe just 6, but definitely 6 at least, is an inflammatory kind of agent, pro-inflammatory agent, I guess. And omega-3 is an anti-inflammatory, and it certainly seems to be the case that as inflammation increases, bad things increase. Obviously inflammation has functions in the body and can help protect you from diseases and all sorts of things and helps you heal, but at the same time, too much inflammation seems to pretty much only be bad. So I wondered whether maybe 6 and 9s were messing me up, so I'm trying some omega-3s, and I don't want to say I've noticed anything, because I haven't really, apart from that sometimes I burp and it smells like cod liver oil to me. But yeah, don't hate it. When meditating, it's impossible to know without simply knowing that you're not half the size you've always considered yourself to be. Oh, what a stupid thing. You've always considered yourself to be, or a quarter of the size, and so on. Also, when meditating, I think the hardest bridge to cross as a beginner is going from a sensation of feeling the breath. By looking at the area of focus in your mind, to actually feeling the raw sensation as it occurs. So, the idea of not being a person located somewhere behind. Okay, so basically, I think maybe it's easier for blind people, because I'm so dependent on vision that even when I'm trying to focus on a sensation in my body with my eyes closed, I'm really just looking at a mental picture of what that area looks like. I'm kind of focusing, but not really. The idea of not being a person located somewhere behind your face is so hard to overcome, because we are so dependent on our vision. And that is the focal point of all visionary information. As we orient our bodies in the world, the area behind our eyes is what remains constant, while the position of all other things appear to move relative to it. However, with eyes closed, it should be possible to not think in this way, despite the obvious evolutionary advantage of doing so. So yeah, you want to protect your brain, so it's good to know, to be thinking about you being your brain, because that's how you'll move out of the way more easily. And now Antonio Damasio presents himself as a proponent, although not by name, of Ollieism. His description of the role of feelings in the formation of culture and society are in perfect accordance with my form of egoism. As I have said, our societies and moral theories are already underpinned by ethical egoism, and should indeed be that way. And he was talking about how feelings have, done that, basically. And what are feelings if not some sort of self-interest type thing? And I'll address this later, how I need a better word. The last acceptable form of individual racism. Books such as Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race treats individuals it's actually not that racist, but it was racist because I read something. I wanted to see the description, like a synopsis or something, and there was some Guardian article that quoted some line, and the line was something like, "This isn't the case for all white people, but when I talk to white people about race, when I talk to most white people about race, their eyes do something like roll back and ears fill with treacle, and they don't listen." And by acknowledging that it's not all white people, that makes the title racist in my book. Not that obviously that racist, I don't really care that much. I'm just saying it's just anyway, and obviously it's got that title to try and sell copies, but whatever. It treats individuals differently and judges the content of their character based on the colour of their skin, despite acknowledging that not all white people necessarily fit the model. I was talking about this with Nash. Nash assumed and misinterpreted that I had said based on her perception of people with my Nash assumed and misinterpreted what I had said based on her perception of people of my skin colour, and that's not. She could make that same mistake if she was white or any ethnicity. It doesn't depend on her ethnicity to make that mistake. But she assumed I'd said things like white privilege don't exist, which I'd never said, and some similar things. And the only reason I think she only it's because there is a connotation. there are connotations associated with being white now that you won't accept that. And I argue, I use it sometimes as a joke because I don't like the idea that nothing any white person could achieve isn't the result of their white privilege. So yeah, but anyway. It is books, or more specifically book titles, like the one above, and so maybe I should blame her publisher if it turns out she didn't create the title, although she might have done, that cause this kind of willful ignorance of an individual's identity. Similarly, with show titles like Dear White People, so too with Jordan Peterson, Michael Eric Dyson interaction. It's also not a matter of. It's not an interracial problem because it can occur intra-racially. And we see this with the SJWs all the time, who you'll get a white male or a white female saying to, who's not saying to someone, so those ones are part of the movement, and they'll say, who are social justice warriors, let's say, and they'll say to a non-social justice warrior white male that you're a white male, therefore whatever you say to them. Anyway, racism in the past has typically been some variation of people of X race or of X skin colour aren't as intelligent as us, and therefore don't deserve the same, that's quote unquote us, and therefore don't deserve the same rights we have, or deserve to be treated as lesser individuals. The racism that is occurring here, which is nowhere near as damaging on an individual or societal level, of course, but that doesn't mean it's not. But that doesn't mean it's right. That doesn't mean it's not wrong. It is racism regarding a person's ability to show compassion or comprehend, and still, although in a less direct sense, against their intelligence. It is assumed that white people are too stupid to understand black culture or the institutionalised racism experienced by black individuals, or for them to sympathise with these individuals. And the metric for this assumption? Why, the colour of their skin, of course. For some unacceptable reason, it is acceptable in this day and age to characterise white people, all white people, as being a group of intolerant, incorrigible, inconsiderate fuckwits. A bit Stephen Fry there. Dear white people, the colour of your skin tells me all I need to know about you as an individual. Dear white people, we are not the same. Dear white people, fuck you. So, and obviously I haven't actually watched that thing because I watched the trailer actually because I was interested, and it seemed to pretty much be in accordance with the thing. And I think I read a bit about it, and it was a little bit exactly what you'd expect. And I read a kind of article about the book, rather than reading the book, and again, same story. But I don't really have a problem with it because it doesn't really get to me in such a deep sense. I'm just trying to make people realise why. So I don't think we can fight racism with racism. I'm just talking about what it actually means. The reason we want to get rid of racism is because it's an inherently bad idea. So if the only way to get rid of the most prevalent form of racism is to introduce another form of racism, I'd say that's not really the problem. That's not really a solution. Anyway. I think I think one of the real problems with arguing against identity politics is how, merely by doing so, you appear to many to be fighting solely against the identities they claim you are not a part of. It appears this way to them, because identity politics as an idea preys on the people based on the identities that it itself defines. So when I argue against treating people differently based on the colour of their skin prior to having any other information about that individual, it isn't hard for someone to construe this as me perpetuating the racism found in society because some proportion of the people I am arguing against happen to not be of my race. But the reason they are likely to be of a different race than me is that a movement like identity politics forces people into categories by race, and therefore if I refuse to accept the arguments of someone who claims to represent one group identity, I must therefore be a member of some opposing group identity, when in truth I despise group identities at a fundamental level. And the other truth is, I genuinely believe that it is just... Oh, hang on. And the other truth is, I genuinely believe that it is just. In fact, sometimes I wonder if it might be more... just as, sorry. And the other truth is, I genuinely believe that it is just as, in fact, sometimes wonder if it might even be more likely that the titles of the book I mentioned earlier, and the title of the show, Dear White People, were devised by white individuals who are strong advocates of group identities. I would not be surprised in the least if this was the case. In fact, the book title is only racist because of how it clashes with the author's acknowledgement that not all white people, eyes roll back and ears fill with treacle when the topic of race is raised. If the title was in accordance with this statement and was something more along the lines of why most white people make discussing race difficult, then I wouldn't be. Then I wouldn't deem it racist. But then I guess it couldn't sell so well. And who cares about racism and truth when there's money to be made, right? But I'm blaming the publisher for that, probably. Unless she came up with the title as well, in which case I blame her. I think we all understand that hierarchies exist, and at least some of us are capable of seeing how and why they might be useful. Or, if not that, at least how it would be useful to understand them. My personal problem is that not all hierarchies are as essential or laudable as others. Furthermore, not all hierarchies are as justifiable as others. It is essential and reasonable to assume that hierarchies can and will develop naturally to suit the needs of the societies they govern. However, not all hierarchies should be eternal, and some hierarchical functions will become less necessary as the society develops. Some hierarchies will account for traits which are strictly and exclusively heritable, and not open to an individual's perseverance. The obvious hierarchies of conventional beauty, perhaps being one of these. Similarly, intelligence is largely limited by an individual's genetic intelligence cap. And so a hierarchy that selects purely for intelligence cannot select according to the equal opportunity, truly equal, motive we wish to uphold. So what are these unfair hierarchies? Do we do away with them? Do we choose to devalue them and replace them with some respectable alternatives that are open to perseverance? Well, then too, you would create a hierarchy for perseverance, and of course this trait will be to some degree heritable. But I think the opportunity for individuals to climb hierarchies, if they are willing, is preferable. So, wisdom, which can be developed more freely than intelligence, I think should be favoured over intelligence. Beauty should be expanded to include strength of character, although obviously the intelligence thing is still very, very important that we have intelligence. And we don't start putting people with no intelligence in positions that require intelligence for them not to be incompetent. Beauty should be expanded to include strength of character, which it kind of does already a little bit. And in truth, I really don't have any satisfying solutions to this problem, so those suggestions were kind of just empty. In fact, I think beauty was the wrong term earlier. Beauty can be made to encompass more than what I actually meant it to mean. Perhaps then my quarrel is with the pedestaling of the hierarchy of physical attractiveness. Among the most powerful hierarchies in our society are those of physical attractiveness, socio-economical status, and intelligence. But these are not values that we actually deem, at least I hope we don't, the most admirable. Our hierarchies should reflect the values we wish to promote, or they shan't be promoted. Also, it should be obvious that different cultures hold different hierarchies to different standards and value some over others. They also have different standards within hierarchies, physical attractiveness being the most obvious example. Take traditionally Japanese cultures, for example. Honor would be a hierarchy to which... I need to pause this for a second, start a new one. Okay, hopefully it'll let me send that last one now. Physical attractiveness being the most obvious example, take traditionally Japanese cultures, for example. Honor would be a hierarchy to which they lend much greater weight to. And as for physical attractiveness, the Japanese women who they perceive as the most attractive would not be the same women who, from the same sample of the Japanese population, people of Western cultures would deem the most attractive. And I should clarify that I'm not saying the Western culture would not select for people based on their Japaneseness. Instead, that the Japanese women they would find most attractive, and thus would be at the top of that hierarchy, wouldn't necessarily have the same rank in the Japanese equivalent hierarchy. Egoism doesn't work as a name because of the connotations of the word ego. Self-interest theory fails for the same reason, because of self. Ollieism is too narcissistic. Individualism gives the wrong impression about it being best to act as part of a collective. I just need to come up with a better word that doesn't have all those problems. So something like subjectivism doesn't work because that's already a word and doesn't really capture it. Subjective experienceism, maybe. Consciousnessism doesn't really work. Maybe something like selfless egoism is the way of doing it. I don't know. Egoless egoism. Another problem with our hierarchies is that the rewards for climbing almost all hierarchies, including the socio-economic hierarchy itself, tend to be variations of enhancements of your socio-economic status. Well, and then and reproductive fitness, obviously. And unfortunately, one of the aspects of hierarchies that needs to take one of the biggest hits to its value is economic standing, because that is not a good one, I don't think. If we are willing to entertain the possibility that there is some level of hive mind intelligence / consciousness that occurs emergently via interaction among the human race, then it should be noticed that the hive mind characteristics would be capable of transcending, although this might not be the best word, time. Just as a neuron in the brain could fire and cause the cascade of neural firing and emergent thought independent of the initial neuron's continued existence by means of the communicated word, most especially the written and now recorded word, the utterances of the deceased become integral to the emergent collective mind's present state. Jesus Christ. This is in essence the equivalent form of neuroplasticity for the hive mind. So, just as a thought, right, isn't coexistent with, it can't be coexistent at the same time. Well, maybe it is from start to finish, maybe it is. Anyway, let's forget about it. There's another thing I was going to say. What was I going to say now? Oh yeah, so another thing so I've talked about this before, jumping on grenades and stuff as an argument against egoism. I think the honor cultures of Japan and places like that, and so, like among the samurais and all that, with harikiri and seppuku, not that I've tried to pronounce this correctly, I think that's a clear rebuttal of that argument against egoism, because it should be obvious in a culture where they want honor, that honor is a big part, and they want it to be a big part, right? If someone didn't commit seppuku and people found out that they should have done and don't, and so they've besmirched their honor or the family's honor or whatever, then it actually would have happened that that person would have been treated so poorly that their life wouldn't have been worth living. So the act of seppuku actually becomes in your self-interest to do that. Yeah. And so if we wanted to have an honor culture where we wanted people to jump on grenades, and if everyone knew that we were we should be acting in our self-interest all the time, there was another thought I need to come back to about the game theory thing. Anyway, if we knew that we wanted to be acting in our self-interest all the time, but as a society we wanted people to be the kind of people that sacrifice themselves to save more than others, then we'd need to make it a case that people who don't do that do experience life's not worth living, effectively. And so that's just what those cultures have done, and that is why honor cultures are so powerful. Something about the game theory thing. Oh yeah, I was thinking just basically about maybe still writing my book and just focusing more on the egoism side of things, and then referencing lost connections as a good thing to, because once you realise that you're trying to act in your self-interest, if you think you're smart enough to solve the game theory problem of how you should be behaving to actually be in your self-interest all the time, is you're an idiot, because we've been doing that with a kind of hive mind by being able to just the spoken and written word and recorded people who have catalogued their own experiences and what works best for them, and then we've formed them into, well, religions partly, but also they're based on false premises, so they're not good. But if we can extract the life advice from them that is most likely to work out best for you, so like the hierarchy thing, right? So Jordan Peterson does that thing where he says the Christ figure is the figure that evolves as we start to realise the characteristics of the people that sit at the top of across all dominance hierarchies, although I don't like the word dominance hierarchy, because you could have a hierarchy, you could have a dominance hierarchy that selects for non-dominance, right? Selects for not pacifism, but kind of cooperativism. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So as we start to, and as you climb hierarchies, your subjective experience becomes better, so your life becomes more worth living. So as we start to catalogue all the things you should be doing, and we have been doing that, to climb all the hierarchies, to improve your method of your quality of life subjectively, then we can. That's basically what we should be doing, and you ignore that advice at your peril, because you're not smart enough to work out what is actually in your self-interest. And we see this all the time. So you might think that it's in your self-interest when you try to act against these things, and you think, "Oh, I really want to." Well, it's like what happens when people do stupid things like break the law, to murder or rape or things like that. Obviously, their life almost immediately becomes worse than it was, even if they didn't believe it could have gotten any worse. So yeah, or maybe it couldn't have gotten any worse, and maybe that was the right decision for them because their life had gone so bad because they hadn't been following advice of the universe. So yeah, social creatures. Lost Connections, I think, does a good deal of like maybe Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life is, because obviously that's effectively what he was doing, trying to provide things for characteristics that bring people to the top of the hierarchies. But yeah, and my problem with it is that some hierarchies are literally what's the word for when you conquer a mountain? Unconquerable, I guess. Conquer. By certain individuals because of their genes. So you'll never be at the top of the intelligence hierarchy if you're born with Down syndrome. But yeah, just so unfortunately we just have to do the best we can. Right, I'm going to end it there. That was a long one. I've got to get ready to go.